I want to focus this conversation on regulation, especially because you spend so much time in DC meeting with policymakers and regulatory authorities. And speaking about crypto, I can imagine that a big goal is to educate them, but I'm wondering how effective are these conversations, and is it proving to really inform them and educate them about this nascent industry?
Actually, it is, and I would say the industry has been working on education for many years, to the point where there are certain policymakers in DC and members of Congress who are really conversant with the technology, what it means, all the catchphrases we all know and use. And I will say we just did a crypto policy boot camp a few weeks ago in conjunction with the Solana Foundation to also educate founders, investors, and others in the space about how to go out, educate, and engage on the Hill and with policymakers in the US as well.
Can you take us through how crypto regulation is enforced right now here in the US? Obviously, we've seen a lot of regulation by enforcement, with agencies like the SEC going after crypto companies, including Coinbase, which was sued by the agency back in June. What do you think about regulation by enforcement? Is that the right approach, or is more of a comprehensive framework needed?
I think it's unquestionable that a more comprehensive framework is needed, and we have that from Congress, both in the form of the Fit for the 21st Century Act, which made it out of 2 subcommittees in the House on a bipartisan basis, and with the stablecoin bill that also made it out of 2 House committees on a bipartisan basis. And I think that that's even been acknowledged, and that it's been moving forward even just out of committee is really important. But I also think that crypto is not unregulated in the United States. A lot of the centralized players are licensed as money services businesses, as have money transmission licenses throughout the states, and are really working to work within the current regulatory framework, at least when they're involved in centralized crypto asset activities.
Now, you beat me to it, but obviously we have seen some regulatory advancements here in the US, including the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, or the Fit for the 21st Century Act, as you just noted. But do you think that's enough? What do you make of those developments? Do you think more needs to be done?
I do think that's enough if it really moves forward in a meaningful way. Fit for the 21st Century is looking to be very comprehensive for centralized crypto asset players and for crypto issuance in the United States, and really split regulation between the SEC and the CFTC. Much of Fit for the 21st Century mirrors what is called the Markets in Crypto Asset Regulation, or MiCA, in Europe, which is also a very comprehensive law for centralized crypto asset activity and token issuance as well in the EU. So I do think that that's a great first step, and it's incredibly comprehensive. So in terms of what's more, as I said, we also have money transmission licenses and other certain types of licenses, which does cover certain types of centralized crypto asset activity.
Do you think the Fit for the 21st Century Act will actually get approved?
I think there are a lot of priorities in Congress right now, and I'm not sure if crypto is the primary one or moving FIT. I do know that Chair McHenry is very motivated to move FIT, certainly out of committee and onto the House floor. And I'm hopeful that, to your original point about education, that there's been enough education that people understand why having regulation in the US is at least something very important to consider for the crypto industry.
Now, you mentioned MiCA. We have seen a lot of regulatory advancements overseas in places like the EU, as well as Singapore, Dubai. MiCA was the first comprehensive framework for crypto regulation in the world. What stood out to you in that framework, and do you think there's anything from that framework that lawmakers here in the US should perhaps take and incorporate into a bill here in America?
Great question. MiCA was born out of the concept of Libra. And the idea that if you were going to have something new that was supposed to act like money, you at least needed to have regulation around it. So MiCA started back in about 2017, 2018, and we just saw it pass, 4 or 5 years later. I think there's a lot to take from it. First, that you really should be looking at centralized crypto asset activity as a primary place to begin with creating a regulatory framework, right? We know how to regulate centralized financial type of activity. So I think that's one part of MiCA that's really, really promising and important. It does exempt services that happen in a fully decentralized manner. So MiCA doesn't touch DeFi, and it also doesn't touch NFTs now. And I think that's a really important takeaway for everybody who's thinking about crypto asset regulation, because this is extraordinarily novel, a lot of innovation, and does not, as I said before, sort of fit in the traditional framework that we think of when you think of centralized economic/crypto activity.
It's important to note that MiCA is expected to take effect next year.
That's right.
But what region would you say wins the race, so to speak, in terms of crypto regulation? Is it the EU?
I don't think it is the EU. I think there's been some interesting information that right after MiCA passed, there was a lot more VC investment in crypto businesses in the EU, but I don't think we've seen that all take off as much as everybody has expected. I do think that Circle has started creating a headquarters in France, and I think other Coinbase and others are looking to also find EU type homes as well, but I don't think that everybody is going to pick up and move to the EU. I am hopeful that the US really takes a lead here to make sure that there is a good framework to continue building out this industry, but I actually think that Asia, which has actually been engaged in crypto asset regulation for longer than people have even talked about. Japan has had good regulations for centralized crypto asset exchanges for a long time, may actually win the race long term.
Do you think it's too late for the US to catch up to the rest of the world as it pertains to crypto regulation?
No, I really don't. I see the surprise on your face. The US has been the home for innovation for a very long time, and particularly with Web 2. People do see this as an important market and an important place to build out technological activity. As I said, Asia is also extremely attractive, Dubai as well, including with their really great regulatory framework that they've been putting together. So there's certainly a race right now, but I don't think anybody will count the US out, particularly with the fact that there are two bills, at least, that have been out there and have passed out of committee.
So what do you think it will take for the US to catch up to the rest of the world?
I don't know if I think the US is behind, right? Like I know MiCA has passed and there have been other laws passed, but the innovation keeps happening. We have some really strong companies, crypto companies that are here, both Coinbase, which is public, and other private companies that are really quite large and very dominant in the space. And so I am hopeful that these large efforts that everybody is putting into policy, both from the centralized and decentralized players, will really motivate members of Congress to move forward with good regulations.
Now, you touched on this, but many crypto firms here in the US, like Coinbase, are expanding internationally as we have seen all these regulatory advancements abroad. We just learned that Robinhood is looking to expand into Europe. So what do you make of all those developments, and do you expect to see more crypto firms here in the US move overseas amid the lack of regulatory clarity here and all the developments abroad?
Yes, I do think if anybody really could win the crypto regulatory race, it may also be the UK. I did count them out in the last one, but they shouldn't be disregarded at all, because they've been very forward thinking and very great at putting together a framework that's both meant to support innovation and also put on regulatory guardrails as well. And they have this access to great markets, right? The UK markets are really good. And so there are a lot of companies, both software development companies and more centralized crypto CeFi players, moving to the UK. So I think we should expect a lot of US-based crypto companies to also be expanding overseas. And this is a global, borderless, right, technology. So of course people should be expanding all over the place as well.
Speaking with CNBC last month, the chief legal officer with Ripple said that regions like Singapore, Dubai, and the EU are showing rational regulatory frameworks as it pertains to crypto, and they're promoting innovation, while the US has, quote, lost our way, focused on power and politics and putting that battle over who should regulate crypto over sound policy. What do you make of that argument?
I do think that the three branches of government in the US are really trying to balance out how crypto regulation moves forward, actually. And I think the impact of our court system, especially for something like Ripple, can't be underscored enough, and is keeping this power play in check a little bit in a way that I think for lawyers we thought might happen, and now we're really seeing it come to fruition. and with a number of important decisions, both the XRP/Ripple decision that we've seen out of the Southern District of New York, the Risley decision on Uniswap, which is a DeFi decision and says Uniswap Labs cannot be responsible for third parties who are building on the protocol, is really impactful. And so I think the courts are actually shaping how this power play moves forward, and also sort of stems the tide so that Congress can step in and really perform its role in creating sound legislation for this industry.
What do you think lawmakers here in the U.S. should be focused on now, especially following several scandals and bankruptcies, including the collapse of FTX, which was put back into the spotlight recently with the trial of its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried? Of course, that resulted in a guilty verdict. But what do you think lawmakers can do to restore the trust that was lost following events like the collapse of FTX?
I think it goes back to your initial question about education. I think they need to educate themselves fully to understand how this industry works. I think, to your point, there have been lots of headlines that grab people's attention, many of which aren't based in facts or are really meant to be clickbait in a number of ways. And I understand why that is interesting. And I think there's been a narrative around crypto for a long time that it's, used for illicit purposes or not meant to really be something that's part of our everyday lives. But crypto is part of people's everyday lives now. And I think understanding that, accepting it, and seeing how the technology works and how the ecosystem has been built out, both from centralized players, what DeFi is, NFTs, and understanding that will allow lawmakers to put things in place that allow this ecosystem to grow responsibly in the US.
So going back to the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried, we've recently got that guilty verdict. I'm wondering, as a former litigator, what was your reaction to that and the quick deliberations and the fact that the jury deliberated in just, I think it was 3 hours or so?
It's pretty rare that a jury comes back that quickly, having done a number of trials. In my former life, juries do not come back that decisively on multiple counts unless they are quite sure. And it was, I think, says a lot about how the trial went and how forceful the prosecution's case was. But I also think U.S. Attorney Damian Williams really said it best when they were waiting for the jury. He said, it's not about crypto, and this is not about Sam Bankman-Fried. This is about a tale as old of time of financial fraud. And I think that's what we all thought when it happened. And I think it's true to this day as well, that it's really not about the industry, but it's much more about a traditional fraud.
So do you think there are any lessons from this trial that the crypto industry can take to heart? Is there anything that came out of this trial that you think stood out to the crypto industry as a whole?
I just think generally the crypto industry, especially as you're building something new and different that is meant to capture people's imaginations, is to be good actors, generally, and do what is right in order to ensure that this is something that can take off and really fulfill the promise that it has.
In June, Polygon launched an open database for blockchain use cases. And a month after that database was launched, you noted that there's a big demand for this database. I'm wondering if that still holds true and if this database is in fact helping to educate policymakers.
It is, actually, and I'm always surprised, but whenever I'm meeting either on the Hill or I've met with regulators, people who I didn't even expect to have known it said that somebody showed it to them when they were asking what blockchain is good for. And I've really been surprised at how well it's been received, not just by the community for educational tool, but really by lawmakers and policymakers everywhere in the world. So it's catching on, and so people should keep talking about it, and we're happy that we've put something together. We're very near 500 projects that are listed on there generally, so we'll make a big fun announcement when that happens.
And it's called the value prop. And for those who are not familiar with it, can you provide some examples of those use cases that are on this database?
They abound for sure, and they're across all sectors of the economy, but there are things like the California DMV's blockchain project where they're putting car registrations on chain, to something like Courtyard.io, which tokenizes collectibles and allows you to use your tokenized collectibles in various different ways, to something like land registries that has also been put on the blockchain. So it really spans the gamut of things, and of course it also includes things like stablecoins and DeFi and NFTs that we all know very well, but I think it really shows how broadly this industry has been built out.
Can you take us through Polygon 2.0? What can people expect with that upgrade?
Polygon 2.0 has been really exciting, but it really is meant to build out this vision of having the underlying layer of the internet with lots of interconnected chains and moving forward in that way. And we announced that Polygon Labs and Near Foundation are partnering to create another ZK-powered L2. And that's really the vision moving forward, that independent actors throughout the entire crypto ecosystem will continue building out specialized chains that will allow people to engage in different types of activity, build different types of apps on them. And so we'll have a blockchain-based internet rather than the TCP/IP Web 2-based internet that we have today.
Since we're approaching the end of the year, I'm curious to get your crypto outlook for 2024. What do you think people can expect, especially from a regulatory perspective?
I think we started 2023 in a very challenging place, and I'm really excited ending 2023 where we are right now. I'm not sure, if you asked me in January, would I expect there to be two pieces of really monumental crypto legislation in the US that had passed out of a House committee. I probably would have said that doesn't sound likely. So I think that there's a lot more that's unexpected to come in a very positive way. And I think that even expanding outside of financial use cases to the wide array of non-financial blockchain-based use cases is something we'll see having a lot of attention in 2024.
And what can people expect from Polygon in 2024?
More exciting Polygon 2.0, more exciting announcements. We announced the relaunch of Polygon Village, which is a huge grants program that is really meant to foster lots of different applications and projects being built throughout the entire ecosystem. So a lot more building, a lot more exciting tech, and really seeing this vision be built out more.
Well, good luck with everything that you are trying to accomplish in the blockchain and crypto space. Rebecca Rettig, Chief Legal and Policy Officer with Polygon Labs, thank you very much for joining us here in New York City in person.
Thank you so much.